UK's central bank offered little surprises today, holding rates at 4% and scaling back its government bond holdings. The message, though, remains cautious. Future cuts will be gradual and careful. Governor Andrew Bailey was blunt. We're not out of the woods yet. James Smith is developed market economist at ING. So, James, what are the dangers that the Bank of England see ahead?
Well, merely that inflation is still very high. It's pretty close to 4%. Could keep creeps.
Rachel Reeves' winter fuel payment raid. The silent attack on 500,000 pensioners. Right. Before we dive into this absolute bombshell that's about to shake the very foundations of British retirement security, smash that subscribe button because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you view Labour's economic policy. Trust me, you'll want to be subscribed for what's coming next. Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing nothing short of a calculated assault on Britain's most vulnerable citizens, and it's happening right under our noses. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor who promised to protect working families, has just orchestrated what can only be described as the most cynical stealth tax raid in recent memory. 500,000 pensioners are about to lose their winter fuel payments, and the way she's doing it is nothing short of diabolical. Let me paint you the picture that Westminster doesn't want you to see. While Reeves stands at the dispatch box talking about fiscal responsibility and protecting the vulnerable, she's simultaneously engineering a system that will strip essential winter support from 500,000 elderly Britons over the next 4 years. The audacity is breathtaking, the methodology is cunning, and the consequences will be devastating. Here's how this masterpiece of political deception works. The winter fuel payment, worth up to £300 and absolutely crucial for keeping Britain's elderly warm during our increasingly harsh winters, is now being withheld from pensioners earning more than £35,000. Now, £35,000 might sound like a comfortable income to some, but let's be brutally honest about what's happening here. This isn't about targeting the wealthy. This is about creating a trap that will ensnare hundreds of thousands of ordinary retirees who've done everything right their entire lives. The truly insidious part of Reeves' plan lies in the intersection of two seemingly separate policies. First, she's frozen the income threshold for winter fuel payments at that £35,000 level. Simultaneously, the state pension is set to rise by 4.7% next April under the triple lock, with private pensions following suit at around 4% in line with inflation. Do you see what's happening here? It's a perfectly orchestrated pincer movement that would make Clausewitz proud. Picture Mrs. Henderson from Gloucestershire, a 73-year-old retired teacher who's never earned more than £30,000 in her working life. She's been receiving her winter fuel payment religiously, using it to heat her modest two-bedroom terrace house through the bitter months. But thanks to Reeves' cleverly constructed trap, her combined pension income is about to creep just over that £35,000 threshold. One day she's entitled to vital winter support. The next, she's cut off entirely. No gradual reduction, no transitional support, just a brutal cliff edge that will leave her choosing between heating and eating. The numbers are staggering, and they tell a story of systematic abandonment. According to bombshell analysis by consultants Lane Clark and Peacock, over 100,000 pensioners could find themselves above the threshold within the next year alone. But here's where it gets truly shocking. By 2029, when this Parliament concludes, we're looking at nearly 500,000 elderly Britons stripped of this essential support. Sir Steve Webb, former pensions minister and current partner at Lane Clark and Peacock, hasn't minced his words. He's called this exactly what it is, yet another stealth tax. And is absolutely right. This isn't fiscal responsibility. This is fiscal vandalism dressed up in the language of prudent housekeeping. Millions of pensioners are being dragged into higher tax brackets purely through inflation, and now Reeves are compounding this misery by freezing the winter fuel payment threshold. But let's talk about the broader context, because this assault on pensioners doesn't exist in isolation. We're witnessing a systematic dismantling of the social safety net that previous generations built and paid for through decades of contributions. These aren't benefit scroungers or tax dodgers. These are people who worked their entire lives, pay their taxes, raise their families, and contribute to society in ways that go far beyond mere economic metrics. The timing of this revelation is particularly galling, as we head into what meteorologists are predicting could be one of the harshest winters in recent memory. Rachel Reeves is systematically stripping winter support from those who need it most. Energy bills are soaring, inflation is eating away at fixed incomes, and now the government is removing one of the few lifelines that help pensioners maintain their dignity and warmth during the coldest months. What makes this even more infuriating is the sheer dishonesty of the political presentation. Labour came into power promising to protect working families and the most vulnerable in society. They spoke of compassion, of understanding the struggles of ordinary Britons, of building a fairer society. Yet here we are, witnessing a chancellor who's implementing policies that would make even the most ardent conservative blush with shame. The mechanics of this stealth tax are particularly cruel because they exploit the very systems designed to protect pensioners. The triple lock, introduced to ensure that state pensions kept pace with the cost of living, is now being weaponized against the very people it was meant to help. As pensions rise to match inflation, more and more retirees will find themselves pushed over arbitrary thresholds that strip away vital. This isn't just about the £300 winter fuel payment, significant though that sum is for someone living on a fixed income. This is about a fundamental breach of the social contract between government and citizens. When people work their entire lives, pay their taxes, and contribute to society, they have a reasonable expectation that the state will provide basic support in their twilight years. What Reeves is doing represents a betrayal of that contract on an industrial scale. The regional implications are particularly stark. Pensioners in the north of England, Scotland, and Wales, areas where Labour supposedly champions the working class, will be disproportionately affected. These are communities where every penny counts, where the difference between £34,999 and £35,001 in annual income could determine whether someone can afford to heat their home through January and February. The political calculations behind this move are as cynical as they are transparent. Pensioners, traditionally conservative voters, are being systematically targeted while Labour protects its core constituencies. It's divide-and-rule politics at its most base, using the tax system as a weapon to punish political opponents while rewarding supporters. But perhaps most damaging of all is what this says about Labour's broader economic philosophy. Despite all the rhetoric about building a fairer society, when push comes to shove, they are perfectly willing to balance the books on the backs of the most vulnerable. The same party that finds money for pet projects and ideological initiatives suddenly discovers fiscal prudence when it comes to keeping elderly Britons warm in winter. The human cost of this policy will be measured not just in pounds and pence, but in lives and dignity. How many pensioners will spend this winter wrapped in blankets instead of turning on their heating? How many will develop respiratory conditions because they can't afford to maintain adequate temperatures in their homes? How many will be forced to choose between medication and heating bills? Rachel Reeves' winter fuel payment raid represents everything that's wrong with modern British politics. The triumph of technocratic tinkering over human compassion, the elevation of spreadsheet calculations over real-world consequences, and the casual abandonment of those who can least afford to fight back. The most galling aspect of this entire debacle is that it didn't have to be this way. There were alternatives, compromises that could have achieved fiscal savings without creating such brutal cliff edges. A graduated reduction system, higher thresholds, or means testing based on assets rather than just income, any of these approaches could have protected the most vulnerable while still achieving budgetary objectives. Instead, Reeves chose a path of maximum cruelty disguised as fiscal responsibility. She's created a system that will systematically strip support from 500,000 pensioners while maintaining plausible deniability about the consequences. It's politics at its most cynical and governance at its most callous. As we move forward, the true test will be whether the British public recognizes this assault for what it is. Will voters see through the careful political language to the brutal reality underneath? Will they hold Labour accountable for this betrayal of the most vulnerable? Or will this become just another example of how easily political promises evaporate when confronted with the harsh realities of power? The answer to those questions will determine not just the fate of 500,000 pensioners, but the very soul of British democracy. Because if we allow governments to systematically target the most vulnerable through stealth taxes and bureaucratic sleight of hand, we're accepting a form of politics that reduces human dignity to mere accounting entries. Rachel Reeves' winter fuel payment rate isn't just bad policy, it's a moral failure that will define this government's legacy. The question now is whether we're going to let her get away with it. Don't let them bury this story under parliamentary procedure and technical jargon. Subscribe to UK Connors for the unvarnished truth about what's really happening in Westminster, because the mainstream media won't tell you what you need to know. Hit that notification bell. Share this with everyone who needs to understand what's at stake, and come back next week when we'll be exposing the next scandal they're hoping you'll ignore.